Hello, everyone. My name is David Garibian. I'm the host of Inside Denago. Today is April 2nd, 2025, a beautiful sunny day here in Los Angeles, California, and I have the pleasure of meeting with Greg Mackey, the president of Cycles of Jacksonville. They are located in Jacksonville, Florida. You can visit their store in person or online at www.cyclesofjacksonville.com. Please enjoy. All right. Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce you to Greg Mackey, the president of Cycles of Jacksonville, located in Jacksonville, Florida. Cycles of Jacksonville has been in business for 32 years. They sell Honda, Powersports, Honda Marine, Triumph, Vespa, Moto Guzzi, Segway, Vulcan, and Denago Powersports. Hello, Greg, and welcome to our podcast.
Hey, David, how are you? Good to see you, and thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's a pleasure, my friend. It's a pleasure, and it's definitely you're an inspirational guy to all of us. And I jumped at the opportunity to say, hey, you know what? If we can have Greg, and you were so graciously willing to accept our podcast today, so thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good to be here, and good to talk about some power sports stuff and see what we can get accomplished today.
That's right. So a little bit of a background on Cycles of Jacksonville. Believe it or not, Cycles of Jacksonville was Denago's first power sports dealer in the United States, signed in November of 2023. Kenny Cook, our Southeast Regional Sales Manager, came to me and said, David, I have to sign the first power sports dealer in America. I have to be the first one. I said, okay, Kenny, that sounds good. And he said, hey, Dave, I have the perfect person, perfect dealership, which is Greg at Cycles of Jacksonville. I said, okay, Kenny, go for it. And so he did. With that being said, again, thank you again so much, Greg, for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about Greg. What makes Cycles of Jacksonville so different, and what makes you successful and different from the rest?
Yep. Well, we are a closely held family business, have been for as long as I've been alive. And my grandfather was an Indian dealer back in the 40s, back when Indian was Indian. He started the Florida Motorcycle Dealers Association. When Indian exited the building, he started a supply company, which he ended up selling to Ed Tucker and got folded into Tuckeraki. So this is all we've ever done. We think we're okay at it. We had 8 stores at one point in time. We're down to this one. We've got a smaller sister location. Being able to be nimble and smaller and make decisions quickly, I think that's an advantage that some dealers overlook. They get maybe a little intimidated by some of the other big dealer groups out there, but you just got to find your strengths and play to those, and deliver a first class experience to the customer.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're going to hit on that subject of first class here in a second. But I want to talk about a little bit about that visit that we did when we visited your store. As our viewers may not know, well, what we decided to do as a part of our first 10 dealers, Johnny Hayes, our national sales manager, and I decided to take a tour and visit these first 10 dealers to get some feedback on the brand. And obviously, Cycles of Jacksonville was part of that first 10 dealers. As a part of that week-long tour, we decided to visit Cycles of Jacksonville. And from the moment that I walked into Cycles of Jacksonville, I was amazed by this dealership. The dealership was clean, organized from front to back. And you don't often see that when you visit dealers, because you'll see a decent showroom, but when you go into the back where the service is, you don't see that same cleanliness and organization. But that wasn't the case with Cycles of Jacksonville. And so when Greg was walking us through his dealership and showing us all the departments, and it kind of gave me that sense of, hey, you know what? I want to buy something. Of course, I was there just to look and talk to Greg and his folks, but it just gave me that sense of, hey, I need to buy something at this dealership. And I'm sure, Greg, that's by design. That doesn't just happen by itself, right? So tell us a little bit about how you set up your dealership and how you make it so organized and so clean. And of course, I'll have some pictures of it because I took some when I was there. But just tell us, including even that wonderful fragrance that you had in your showroom.
Well, that's another great idea that I stole from somewhere. So, but it comes down to process, and one of the things we like to dig deep on during the sales process is making sure the customer gets a dealership tour. And if you're going to do it and do it successfully, things need to be organized, put away. And I think it gives the customer a sense of confidence when things are orderly and going through a process. And that's a key part of what we do, and making sure we're clean and organized. And again, it goes back to that dealership tour that we give. We want to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward. That's for certain.
Absolutely. And when I was walking through the dealership, of course, I had that feeling of wanting to buy something, but I couldn't, I think, put my finger on what it was. And, today in preparation for this podcast, I was doing some digging on your site and it said, on the section where it said about the cycles of Jacksonville and said delivering a first class experience, and and you just talked about that a second ago. And it was and finally now I think that really truly comes together, which is it is a first class experience. If anyone has ever flown on an airplane that's first class, you get that experience of feeling like a VIP, right? And I think when I walked into your dealership, I felt the same. I felt like it was a VIP experience. And the way everything, like you had sections of expensive Moto Guzzi, very nice motorcycles set on one section. So if a Moto Guzzi customer walked in, they saw this beautiful artwork of motorcycles there, and it's like, wow, it's just felt so nice. And you had apparel and you had helmets and everything just set up very nicely and organized. And it was like, yeah, this is a first class experience. So I think you hit the nail on the head there with phrasing the first class experience. So I think anyone that walks into your dealership will definitely get that feeling.
Yeah, and it's important. I think it has to be authentic. It's not something you can fake. And obviously, we're dyed in this industry, and I've got a great passion for it. And most of our employees are active in the industry, and I really think that makes a difference from a customer standpoint. That we don't want to over talk it, and maybe for the first time buyer, not make them feel welcome. So being able to find out where that customer is, meeting them on their level, and getting them on the right product that fits their needs. Again, you have to be authentic with it. And if you do that, it makes the sales process and the delivery process a lot easier.
And I think also, it has a lot to do with the no pressure type of a thing. Sometimes you're kind of intimidated to walk into a dealership and say, hey, you know what, if I walk in, the dealer or the salesperson is going to push me to buy something that I don't necessarily may not be ready right then and there. And I think the formula is also to make that customer feel like they're welcome. And just because they're not making a decision right then and there, purchase a product, they can always come back and it's a friendly, non pressured environment. Right, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. We try to make sure we've answered all the questions, but at the end of the day, if there's some questions left unanswered, they need to seek out on their own. We're fine with that too. We hope we can help them in that journey. I did triathlons for a long time, and the first time I walked into a triathlon bike, because those aren't cheap. They're more expensive than some of our products.
Yeah.
I was intimidated, but the guys took me in, make me feel welcome, and I can tell you that I ended up buying 4 or 5 bikes from them, and price was never the issue after I felt welcome, and it was really about the product and the right fit, and making sure we had the right setup.
Yeah. As myself and obviously yourself as well, you've been to plenty of dealerships that kind of get it and understand what the customer wants and is looking for. And there's plenty of dealerships you visit that kind of miss the mark, and definitely your dealership is definitely one of those dealerships that makes you feel welcomed and comfortable and ease. So I think that has a lot to do with your success, and also that first class, because I think you're a first class type of a guy and you project that onto your dealership. So it's really, really, really cool to see. For some of our listeners here, they may not know where Jacksonville is located. It's on the north east of Florida, correct? Right
It
close
is
to the border. Yeah. And
correct.
when I was, again, doing some research, I noticed that you're very close to the St. John River, and that basically takes you all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, correct?
It does. And a little fun fact: it's one of the 2 major rivers in the world that actually flow to the north. That then the Nile River.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
Amazing.
I think you forgot your Jaguar shirt while you were here too.
Oh, really? Well, possibly. I mean, I don't know. But I can tell you for sure, being in Florida, you have to sell marine, right? So
Right.
obviously bringing on Honda Marine has probably been a really good thing for you. And, I think Honda in general, when you look at that brand, it's such a well polished brand. What can you tell me about the years of selling Honda Powersports, and what can like some dealers who don't necessarily dealers or consumers know too much about that brand? What can you kind of tell them some insider or some cool things that you like about Honda Powersports?
Well, I think one of the biggest key takeaways in all of their product lines, whether it be vehicles, their jet, power sports, is they're known for their reliability. And years ago, I would say they were a lot more innovative and first to the market in a lot of things. They've kind of taken a step back from that. But at the end of the day, it's certainly there's some bells and whistles that might not be available in some of their products. But if you're out on the trail and you need to get home, certainly the first, I think, word that pops up in everybody's mind when it comes to Honda is reliability. And we've had great success with them over the years, and they make a great product. And there's a lot of red floating around this town from our years of being here and doing
Yeah.
business with Honda.
That's right. Man, I can tell you, man, what an iconic brand, right? Honda is. And I think it kind of goes to the what you're saying is that reliability factor. It may not be the most powerful vehicle, it might not have the most bells and whistles, but like you said, if you want to come home from the trail or from the ocean, you buy a Honda.
Yeah,
It's very
Ocean's a big
true.
one. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, you could have a breakdown on an ATV. You'll be, I think, okay. But if you have a breakdown in the middle of the ocean,
it's a bad day.
it's a bad day. I don't think you're paddling back home,
No,
So yeah,
absolutely not.
for sure, for sure, for sure. So talk about a little bit, Greg, because obviously you've been in business at Cycles of Jacksonville for 32 years. In context, you started the business in 1983, and I was born in 1982. So that just goes to show you how long that's been around, and I have a lot of gray, as you can see.
I'm not far
Tell us
behind
some
you.
yeah, well, you're doing okay, I think. So tell us a little bit about how the business has changed and evolved and also products too. Tell us a little bit about the business side of things and also a little bit about the product side of things. How in this 32 years, how has the business changed? How has the vehicles have evolved? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, my personal experience when I first came on back in the early '90s, we were motorcycle dealers and we built motorcycle dealerships. And about 98% of our business here at Cycles of Jacksonville was two wheel product. And if you wanted a ATV, it was kind of like, yeah, we got some of those in the back. Let us know if you want one. And boy, that has gone the other way. Four wheel product makes up about 60% of our business now. And we're revamping and remodeling our dealerships to allow bigger and wider product in the doors. We've had to put garage roll-up doors in a lot of our locations before. So the evolution of the off-road portion of the business has been uh, really eye-opening, and it took me a while to get it to. I shared with you when you guys were here that I started spending a lot of time at the Windrock Park up in Tennessee, and when you pull in there and see the amount of business that is done on side by sides, it's pretty mind blowing. That was a transition for me because I was a motorcycle guy. I love motorcycles. So that's been the biggest shift I've seen in the industry since my time in it.
Well, I mean, Florida having Daytona Bike Week, right? That tells you something, right? That's for sure a bike capital, street
Yeah.
bike capital. And I think that anyone, if they haven't gone to that event, I think it's an eye-opening experience just for that. So I could see what you're saying about, it was mainly just on-road stuff, and then the evolution of the business and the evolution of these vehicles have changed into, first I think it went to dirt bikes and then it went to ATVs, and then now this new thing, the side by sides, and I think maybe even now it's kind of changing from side by sides, even maybe a little bit back to ATVs a little bit. But what have you seen like in that progression? Have you seen that same kind of like dirt bike, ATV side by side, and now are things changing back and going to ATVs from what you can see, or they're still mainly side by side is what the demand is now for off road?
Well, I think some of that shift is shifting back to the ATV, and I think of some of that, maybe even a large portion of it has to do with the pricing. If some of these larger side by sides are pushing $50,000 with HVAC units, so I think moving forward in this business, we're going to see a more price centric customer that maybe doesn't need all the bells and whistles. 20,000, 25,000 by side is going to be a lot more attractive. So yeah, I think we might be getting to the point where some of these side by sides are pricing themselves out of the market. So I think that's probably where we're headed in the short term.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I can only say that if you're a family of four and you want to start going and doing some off-roading with your family, because it's an amazing thing to do with the family, right? It's an amazing experience, an adventure, it's a bonding experience. And I think that if you do want to get into this sport and, buying a four-seater side by side, a lot of people look into that because they're like, hey, you know what, I could buy this four-seater side by side and I can take the whole family with me. And it's kind of like one solution type of a vehicle. But that one solution type vehicle nowadays, if you want to get into the real high performance stuff, which everyone's driven by the high performance stuff because the horsepower war, right?
Right.
It's like you said, it can run up to $50,000. So not everyone can afford that $50,000, and it is at the end of the day a toy, right? As much as we're
Right.
passionate about it, as much as we love it, it's not our day to day vehicle. Having a $50,000 toy that sits in your garage that you can maximum use 10 times out of the year, it's a little pricey. So I can for sure understand why the industry is kind of changing back to a little bit simpler and I think cheaper times. And I think, and you could probably say the same, Greg, if you ever been in the back of a side by side, it's never fun. The driver is probably the one that having the most amount of fun, and the passengers sort of having fun. They're getting dizzy most of the
Right.
time. But if you're in the back, you're not having a good time. So I can contest to that. And a lot of kids who are sitting in the back sometimes fall asleep from the motion of like going up and down. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can see that. And
Yeah,
I think
even
you're
even my daughter, she doesn't even like to ride a bike, but she wants to be on a dirt bike and she wants to be on an ATV when we're out riding side by side. She is like you said, she's not having a lot of fun in the back. She'd rather be driving
no,
her own.
that's right. And I think, when you talk about $50,000 vehicles, right? You can buy a Jeep for $50,000 and less and go off-roading with it, and your family could be very comfortable in a Jeep and then you can drive that every day back and forth to work. So,
Right.
it's just very expensive. I think those side by sides are very expensive. And I think you're very, very correct by saying there is a sweet spot. I think under that 30,000, under that 25,000 region is probably a very good spot where it's affordable to most families. But I think, even one past that, the ATVs I think are very, very ATVs and dirt bikes. I think if you want to get into the sport, they're very affordable. And also, I think as a skill set, it's a really good skill set to learn, because for me, and you can probably say more about it when it comes to street bikes, is learning the self control, right? So if you're on a street bike and you pin that throttle, you're going fast and things are coming at you fast. And same thing I think with an ATV and a dirt bike. If you pin that throttle, man, things are going to happen real fast. And the first one or two times kids fall, I think they learn from that. So yeah, I mean, Greg, I'm sure you can tell us about a few accidents you've had on bikes before, right?
I've had one or two, more than my fair share. And I, like you
Yeah.
said, mentioned it is a skill set. It's a great skill set for kids. It teaches them balance and, things you just don't necessarily get in a side by side. So I'm a big fan, especially when the younger kids are starting off, is putting them on two wheels. So they learn. And I think that translates very well as they get older onto an ATV or side by side. But if you start there, I think you started in the right spot.
Yeah. And I think nowadays too, Greg, and when I talk to family members and even with my son, I try to do everything I can to keep him away from technology as much as possible. Obviously you can't because you want them to know that stuff. Getting them to be disconnected from technology and witness and enjoy the outdoors and actually going on adventures. I think that's the big part of it. And I mean, you said your daughter likes to ride, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's you hit the nail on the head there. I tell you, it's about the only time we see her grinning ear to ear when she's not on her iPad or phone. And once we get her in that environment, she lets go and she forgets she has all that stuff. So once you get them there and get them out riding, it's a good day. And they tend to let go a lot of that stuff. And I know a lot of parents are probably frustrated with the time they spend on their screens. So it is good to get them out and get them enjoying the nature in the open air.
Absolutely. I mean, Greg, like for me, it wasn't as such. My dad was never into power sports or dirt bikes. From my country, Armenia, where we came from, we really didn't have that. But as a kid growing up, I did see ATVs and dirt bikes, and it was kind of like a dream to actually own one of them. So me being in this position of being a power sports GM and all that is I'm living my dream. But talk about a little bit of how you when you got your first bike, or how that experience was your family members into it? Did your dad get you into this? How did that kind of happen, Greg, for you?
Yeah, yeah. It was, we had a separate dealership when I was growing up. It was not this one, but yeah, I had a little Z50, and I might still have some burn marks on the inside of my leg where I just went boop initially and fell right
Yeah.
on its side before they could get there to pull it off. I had some nice burn marks, but I can remember riding that thing until the tires fell off. And also, I think the next Christmas, I got a little four wheeler, and my family lives up in South Carolina. I think maybe 10 degrees at Christmas, and I refused to get off that thing. And I think half my body was frozen by the time they got me inside. But those are good memories, and wouldn't trade them for anything.
That's right. And I think, those memories are, like you said, they're lifelong memories, right? And having that bond with your mom and dad riding, I think it's just something very, very special. You could do all sorts of things, but I think that experience of the family going out and experiencing an adventure or even possibly a breakdown, I think it's even kind of cool because like me and my son, we go out to wherever and we're riding and a breakdown happens or something like that. And we kind of have to use our brain of how to put it back together and cobble it up and come back to the truck. And then my son goes to my wife and says after our ride, he's like, "Hey mom, you know what happened? Dad fixed this and we fixed that, and we, instead of walking back, we figured out how to come back." So I'm sure you have many stories like that too, right, Greg?
Absolutely. You got to get really creative out of the trail sometimes and use what you have. Get a
That's
little
right. That's
MacGyver.
right. That's right. It's in all of us. And I think, going on those type of adventures brings that MacGyver out of us and makes us be creative. And I think that's the really cool thing about this industry. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. Obviously, there's some dangers involved with it, but for the majority of it, I think it's a very fun thing to do with parents and kids, and it's cool.
It is.
So,
And
one thing I wanted to ask you is, obviously you were our first dealer that we signed up, and I'm sure Kenny Cook was very inspiring and very pushy to get you to buy into Denago Powersports. But you having this iconic dealership for 32 years, obviously the dealership Cycles of Jacksonville is its own brand, right? And as a dealership, you're protecting your own brand. So why did you decide to bring on this brand new brand called Denago Powersports that no one has ever heard of? And why did you decide to take on that chance?
well, I think we looked at it from a value proposition, and kind of going back to what we talked about a little bit earlier. When you start to look at some of the price points available with Denago, the value of the product that's there, I think it's a good fit for us to be able to bring some of those customers in that we might not have been servicing before, and get them on a really, really nice unit on something they can afford. We love the product. We've had great success with it, and like I said, I think for us it was a value proposition. I don't feel like we're cannibalizing anything we were doing before. I think it's a nice addition to what we had before.
Absolutely. And I think that's the really cool thing about Denago is exactly what you said, is bringing in people that normally wouldn't walk into your dealership because maybe some of the other brands are more expensive than the Denago brand, but the value proposition is for sure there. And I think for nowadays, for a family of four, I think Denago and value priced brands like Denago are very important to bring in more people into the industry because again, like you said, with that 50,000 side by side, not everybody can afford that. And having a brand that is an introductory brand or is a value price brand or a premium brand at a valuable price is important because it also, I think, starts the journey of young riders getting into this sport.
Yeah, 100% agree. It brought in customers that wonder where they could afford a product that we had here. And it certainly gets them on that path. And hopefully we want them back in for their second and third one too, which is, I think, what every dealership certainly wants to aspire to, and start that chain of riding. But it definitely has brought us some new and different customers. And like you said, they were surprised that, hey, they might have walked out the door with two or three, and one for everybody in the family.
That's right. And I think, for a consumer to walk into your dealership and get that first class experience at an affordable price, I think that that's pretty important too, And again, it sets them off in the right track and saying, "Hey, you know what? I purchased a value priced or not a major brand currently like Honda that's been around for 40 years plus. I purchased a newer brand and it's an affordable brand and my kids drove it for a few years, but the experience that I had at the dealership was so positive and so well that of course my second and third and fourth and lifelong vehicles are going to be purchased from that same dealership. And I think that's really, really important. I think you're very, very correct on that.
Yeah, and
So
it kind of folds back to you guys too. I mean, our experience has been you guys are taking care of the customers. We've had issues. Every brand has issues.
every brand has
You
issue. Yeah.
guys have been very communicative, and tech line's amazing. There's not been a problem we haven't been able to overcome or a customer we couldn't make happy. I think that goes back to the effort you guys are putting in as well, which is, I think, important for our success and both of our success long term.
Yeah, and I mean, for us, Greg, it's about doing the right thing, right? And as you know, Greg, doing the right thing is always more expensive, right? It
Yes, it
always is
is.
costly. But we have to do the right thing, and we have to take care of the dealer and the consumer. That's just the way it goes. If the dealership, we don't take care of the dealership, then the dealership's brand degrades, right? And then the consumer experience is not as good. So for us, it's very, very important that we do the right thing and we take care of. And you know, our tech lines and all that, of course, are there to help dealers and also consumers both ways. But I think, yeah, I think, with my background, I came from the service side of things. And I always made sure that, hey, you know what, if once we do this, we have the products support that we need to take care of our consumers. That was very, very important to me from the get go. And, Josh and Jason are a very critical part of our support team. So, yeah, thank you for
Well,
understanding that.
yeah,
One
you
thing I
guys have
did want to
certainly
say,
delivered.
oh, we trying. One thing really important that you talked about that is, part of that week-long tour that we had when we visited the dealers, we came into your beautiful office there in the background and you sat us down and you said, hey, you know what, David, here's a printout. And it was a 2 or 3 page printout of the things that you would like to see as far as improvements. And till today, I have that in my desk, that letter that, or that, few pages that you had prepared for us, and I always look back on that and I always say, okay, you know what? This was a great suggestion. This was a great suggestion. And this is what we need to do to constantly improve and evolve. And I think that is the key point of Denago and also major brands like Honda and Yamaha and all those brands is they listen to the customer and they listen to the dealer and they always do the right thing of improvement. It can't just be a one-way street. It always has to be you wanting to improve and listening to the dealer, because if you don't listen to the dealer because that's your boots on the ground, then you kind of are lost in a way, right? I could be the best designer in the world, but if I don't listen to my consumers and dealers, then it's kind of lost at that point. So
Yeah,
that's why it was so interesting to walk into a dealership and say, hey, you know what, they've been selling our brand for like 6 months and here's 2 pages, 3 pages of improvement. So I thought it was very organized and I thought it was really well thought of, and it goes back to the high class experience that you talk about. So it's really, really cool.
yeah, and I think we have an obligation to you, and we have an obligation to our customers to provide valuable feedback because complaining without solutions and ideas is just complaining.
Absolutely.
We try to have valuable feedback and do it and present it in a way that hey, this is going to be better for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, with that being said, Greg, when I was preparing again for this podcast, I went ahead and I went on your YouTube page, and there was a section of the YouTube Shorts, and you guys had a lot of funny YouTube Shorts there, and it just made it so funny. So I was like, I started laughing about that, and I encourage all our listeners and viewers here to visit your website and check out your socials because they are pretty funny, and I think sometimes we get caught up in the business of being so serious and so professional, we forget to laugh. And I got a really big kick from those videos. So I thought that was really cool how you guys did that, Craig.
Yeah, we do have a professional side, but we try not to take ourselves too seriously either. We like to have some fun and do some fun TikToks and YouTube videos and keep it light because we do get a ton of feedback on those videos.
Yeah, they're great, man. They're good. They're
Yeah,
really good. About the guy wanting to spend his life savings on a bike, that was great. It made me laugh. I was like, I know how that goes. Several
that's
times
right.
I've
That's
done
right.
that. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So I think, let me ask you, what are you thinking like as far as like obviously we talked about some of the industry shifting. Where do you see the industry going versus like gas and electric? How do you kind of see that adaptation into this industry?
I struggle with that. I really do. I thought this industry honestly would have been further along with adapting to electric, but so far, at least in the southeast, we are just not seeing a lot of traction there. And I'm not sure we're going to in the near future. There seems to be plenty of demand for combustion engines out there. So I, you know, I, my my tenure may be long over by the time we go to full electric in the southeast. I don't know about it. Just seems that our industry, they like the smell of gas, they like the way the engines sound, and now certainly we have some customers that do love their electric vehicles. We're glad and happy they're with us, and we can provide a unit for them as well. But yeah, we just haven't seen a lot of traction yet, and I don't know that I'll see it while I'm still at the helm.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, on the manufacturing end for us, like, we always think about, okay, how much of our development do we want to dedicate to electric stuff, right? We all know that electric is a big part of this, and obviously brands like Tesla and Rivian and all those have made a huge dent in the industry, in the car industry. But, as far as our industry, like one new brand, Stark, which is a really cool brand. I'm sure you're familiar with that brand, right? Stark,
I am.
and they make that Varg, which is that dirt bike. It's really, really state of the art. I mean, just an amazing dirt bike. But the problem is runtime is an issue, and obviously also I think a lot of people sometimes are afraid of adapting to electric vehicles is the aspect of working on it, right? Because this industry, a lot of people, because the vehicles are relatively simple, they like to wrench on their own stuff. And I think, I don't know, what's your experience have been? Do people are kind of, is that one thing that they think about when they're like, hey, you know what, it's an electric, I'm afraid of it, I don't want to work on it? Or it's something else? What do you think?
Yeah, I do. There's definitely that side. I think a lot of, especially when you get into off-road dirt bikes, ATVs, side by sides, those customers like to tinker. They like to add their accessories. They like to put on their bike. But I think there's certainly a segment out there too that they don't want to work on it. They want something that's turnkey and go. I've got friends that have Teslas, and that's their attitude. Like I can just stick my key up to the door opens, I drive it to work, I plug it in when I get home, and I don't ever want to have to do anything. So I think there's both sides, but I think for right now, it certainly seems like the guys that like to tinker and play are the bulk of the business out there.
The gas guys, yeah.
Yeah,
The internal combustion engine, man, it's a beautiful thing, and I think as like fuel injection in our industry is kind of a big thing, right? We don't have direct injection like cars do nowadays. And but that fuel injection, I mean, coming from carburetors to fuel injection was like leaps and bounds. And I think we've been here for what, 20 years now. That it's been around that time that fuel injection bikes have been out, and we really haven't made a big leap to anything else. It's just been there kind of because it works so well. And I think also what it comes down to it is, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. And it really is, like you said, the tinkering aspect of it, fuel injection, it works well. Customers can work on accessories instead of working on carburetors, trying to make things work. It just
right.
works out of the box and it's good to go. But I think, going to another subject of like electrics, when we started talking about electrics and figuring out what we want to do for electrics, as you know, we have a model called the E-Hawk, right? And that E-Hawk for us was like, because I have a younger son, now he's 11, but when he first started to get into the ATVs, I exposed them to like a gas powered ATV. And when I first turned it on and I revved up the engine and he was sitting on it, he kind of got a little scared, and the sound and the vibration, I think, kind of scared him away a little bit. I eventually he got used to it, but it kind of scared him a little bit. And I think, when we started talking about designing an electric vehicle, for us, I think it was a good experiment to try the E-Hawk. And that E-Hawk, it's kind of a cool little ATV. Have you sold many of those E-Hawks or not
We
too many,
have,
Greg?
and yeah, we have, and they are cool, and the lighting, and they got lots of power. It'll haul me around at a high rate of speed.
Yeah, yeah. It's a cool little vehicle, man. And I think, when I was talking with our engineers and I was like, you know what? I want to have a removable battery, and they couldn't understand why I wanted a removable battery, because obviously it's more expensive and there's molds and stuff like that you have to work around. And I said, listen, one of the main reasons why people are afraid to adapt to electric vehicles is because of range, right? Range anxiety. And so now, if you have a removable battery, you just take the battery out and pop another one in. That kind of goes away. And I think, that's one of the reasons why I think the E-Hawk is so successful is because of that removable lithium battery. And I mean, what are your consumers telling you? Do they like that aspect of the removable battery and the app and it being quiet? And what is some feedbacks that you've heard about that vehicle?
Yeah, it's definitely a leg up. And I think if you look at Honda hasn't made this announcement in the U.S., but internationally, they're looking at that same type of concept even for their on-road product. So it is a huge advantage because I can have a spare battery. My kid kills it on the trail. I can just pop a new one in and keep riding. So I do think that is, it's kind of like pulling up at the gas station. Instead of refilling my gas tank, I'm just plugging a new battery in and away we go, and I put the other one on the charger. So I think that solves, like you said, the range issue for sure.
Yeah. And I think, for the small kids, especially, man, because like, that ATV is a Y6 ATV for six and up, right? That young age rider, that 6, 7 year old, is sometimes intimidated by a larger gas ATV. And I think when they sit on this small ATV and they just ride it around for a few minutes, that intimidation factor kind of goes away. And it's like now they can just experience the fun. They're not worried about kind of being scared from them. And I think also what makes that ATV kind of cool is how quiet it is, right? So like parents can let the kids ride around their backyards. It opens up to like a bigger market of places where it could be used. And I always tell my dealers, I say, hey, you know what? If a consumer walks in and they're kind of unsure about this E-Hawk, if you can, let them drive it or ride it for maybe 10 or 15 feet. And usually if they get on that thing and they hit the throttle and they feel that torque, like you said, and that smoothness of it, they're like, wow, I'm sold. This is a great, great little vehicle. And it's so true. It's so true, like what you said. So I think, there is a time and a place for the electrics. I think certainly this model is that. But I think, when you talk about bigger street bikes, which you sell obviously a lot of, maybe the industry is not there yet. But I think, there is definitely that time and place for it, for sure.
Yeah. And it certainly, like you said, it opens up a lot of possibilities in the neighborhood. You don't have your neighbors yelling at you from the noise, and like you said, it's smooth, it's quiet, and it's kind of all those cool lights too. I mean, the kids like that, man. It's a good looking, fun vehicle.
Yeah, and for us, we try to make it family friendly. Obviously, we call it the mom aspect of it, which is mom could be assured that, hey, if they have this app, they put it on 5, 10 or 15 miles an hour, they can grow into the speed, and the mom aspect of it and also the child aspect of it could be comfortable by using this vehicle. I think that's really, really important. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. I That's why I like the E-Hawk. I think it's a really, really cool vehicle. Now, in your dealership, what are some popular models that you sell that are like kind of like that kind of works in your region that you've seen that really works for you, from whether it's from us or from any other brands?
Well, the E-Hawk's certainly a good one, especially we cleaned up at Christmas. And I think anything now that is app based because everybody has an iPhone, everybody's used to using apps. And I think we're starting to see a swing towards some smaller CC on-road bikes. Again, kind of going back to what we had chatted about even on the side-by-sides earlier in the off-road segment, kind of price point stuff seems to be coming back in favor. So I think we're seeing a swing, $10,000 and under. I don't know that we specifically have a handful of units, but I think it's more price pointed now. And if you can hit those marks in those segments and be competitive, like Denago has some real value proposition in a lot of segments. That's I think where we're going to see some growth moving forward.
Yeah. And we're really trying. I mean, obviously, I always like to say to everybody, a way you grow your brand is by having more on-road presence, right? And obviously, we want to get into that segment, that on-road segment. And I agree with you, that small displacement, I think, somewhere around 300 to 500, I think displacement wise, I think it's that sweet spot, and money wise it makes sense, and also it's something that everybody can get into. It's not like an R1 or something like that it's powerful and it's just over the top heavy and it's hard to use. I just think just user friendly type vehicles that are light and app based and things like that. I think you're so right, that are probably going to be in the demand and are in the demand right now for vehicles.
And if you pair that small CC with the replaceable battery, I think you're really starting to get to where that's a home run.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of cool vehicles out there and also cool thoughts that we have for making our brand to the next stage, to the next development. But that's kind of where we look for the dealers and the consumers their support. And one really interesting thing when we talk about that, right? As you were walking me through your service area, I noticed that there was a consumer had taken one of our dirt bikes and painted it pink and put Hello Kitty stickers and glitter all over it. Okay. And I'll put a picture of it. I have it. And so it made me think, when you had that in there, I think one of your consumers had done that, and it was in for service. And so when I came back, that image was always in my mind. And then my assistant Chrissy, she said, "Hey, you know what, David? We need to have more pink for the girls." And I love little girls who love pink and who love to ride. So I wanted to offer something for them, and that's kind of where seeing that bike at your service center inspired the pink kit. That's why we have the pink kit for all the dirt bikes and the ATVs. It's one part number, and you can turn any of our vehicles really into pink. And that was majority of the inspiration came from you and your dealership.
It is an inspirational bike. We love
Yeah.
that bike when it's in here. Everybody wants to ride it.
Really? Really? So
Oh
it's been
yeah.
there for. Oh, wow.
Well, not just when she's in for service.
That's pretty cool, man. That's really, really cool. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we're going to kind of wrap this up, Greg. Is there anything else that you want to talk about in the industry or in your dealership that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of ground. The replaceable battery stuff that we hit on a little bit, I think that's going to have some legs to it. I really do, because it does take away that range issue. But yeah, we're excited with the path moving forward with Denago, and I think you guys are on the right track. You certainly have been very supportive, especially on the tech line, like we talked about earlier, on the back end of business. Very responsive, and I think as a manufacturer, you guys are blazing a pretty cool path.
Well, we appreciate it, Greg. And again, thank you so much for being our first Denago Powersports dealer in America. Thank you for taking the chance on Denago. And also, again, thank you again for being such a stand up guy and just giving our consumers the first class experience from your dealership. So
Yes, sir. Sounds good. I appreciate it. Ready. All right. Bye bye.